On January 7th, 1943, a maid named Alice Monaghan knocked on room 3327 of the Hotel New Yorker. She knocked again. No answer. She let herself in and found Nikola Tesla lying in bed, thin as paper, eyes closed, hands folded neatly across his chest. He was dead. Had been dead for hours, maybe longer. Within 2 hours, federal agents arrived. Not police, not hotel security, federal agents. They seized everything: notebooks, papers, diagrams, personal letters. A safe no one had seen him open in years. They cleared the room like it was a crime scene, not the quiet passing of an 86-year-old man who had been living on crackers and warm milk. And here is where it gets interesting. Because before Alice Monaghan knocked on that door, someone else had been paying very close attention to room 3327. Not the FBI, not the government, the switchboard operators of the Hotel New Yorker. If you're enjoying this so far, drop a comment and let me know your theory on what Tesla was working on in those final years. Now let's get into it. The Hotel New Yorker wasn't just any building. When it opened in 1930, it was the tallest hotel in New York City. 43 floors, over 2,000 rooms, its own power plant in the basement generating enough electricity to run a city of 35,000 people, its own hospital, its own radio station, and a switchboard system that was, at the time, one of the most sophisticated private telephone networks in the country. Every call that came in or went out of the Hotel New Yorker passed through that switchboard. Every single one. There were no direct lines, no private circuits that bypassed the operators. If you wanted to reach someone inside that hotel, you spoke to an operator first. If someone inside wanted to call out, same thing. The operator connected the call. The operator heard the first few seconds. The operator knew who was calling whom, when, and how often. Tesla moved into the Hotel New Yorker in 1934 and never left. He lived there for nearly a decade, occupying rooms on the 33rd floor, room 3327, room 3328, sometimes both at once. He was already famous, already forgotten, already broke. Westinghouse Electric was quietly paying his rent, roughly 150 talent a month, as a gesture of goodwill or guilt or something else entirely that no one has ever fully explained. The man who had designed the alternating current system powering every building in Manhattan couldn't afford his own electricity bill. The irony is almost too perfect. The Hotel New Yorker's basement power plant ran on the very system Tesla invented, generating electricity for the building that housed its creator as a charity case. And this is important. I have to pause here for a second. Because what I just described, that is one case from a much larger pattern. There are 35 documented cases in a document I put together. Different cities, different decades, different types of evidence. Every single one follows the same sequence: discovered, documented, acquired, disappeared. I could not fit all of it into a video. It's in the pinned comment below. Find it before we continue. One talks about. Tesla was still making phone calls, lots of them, right up until the very end. And not casual conversations, not social calls to old acquaintances. These were purposeful, repeated, structured communications with people whose identities have never been publicly confirmed. The switchboard logs of the Hotel New Yorker from 1934 to 1943 have never been released. Think about that for a moment. We have Tesla's seized papers. We have declassified FBI files. We have the Office of Alien Property Records. We have memos from J. Edgar Hoover himself expressing concern about Tesla's theoretical weapons research. But the phone logs from the switchboard, the actual record of who Tesla was speaking with in his final years, those have never surfaced. And someone was keeping track. The switchboard operators knew. They connected the calls. They heard the names. They heard the voices. There are scattered references in historical accounts to Tesla receiving calls from foreign diplomats, military officials, and unnamed representatives of governments that were never identified. One account mentions a call from someone in the Yugoslav embassy. Another references a series of calls from an unidentified party in Washington. Not the FBI, not military intelligence, someone else. Tesla himself told a reporter in 1937 that he had developed a theoretical weapon so powerful it could destroy 10,000 airplanes at a distance of 250 miles. He called it Teleforce. The press called it a death ray. The military establishment publicly dismissed it. Privately, however, the interest was enormous. In 1940, Tesla wrote a technical paper titled New Art of Projecting Concentrated Non-Dispersive Energy Through Natural Media. He offered this paper to multiple governments simultaneously: the United States, Great Britain, the Soviet Union, Yugoslavia. He wasn't being reckless, he was being strategic. He believed that if every major nation possessed the same defensive weapon, war would become impossible. Mutually assured destruction, 15 years before the nuclear version of that idea became official policy. Now think about what that means for the switchboard. If Tesla was negotiating with multiple foreign governments from room 3327, every one of those conversations passed through the Hotel New Yorker operators. Every incoming... Before I go further, that document in the pinned comment. If you have not found it yet, go there now, because everything I cover in these videos is one piece of a pattern that only becomes visible when you see all 35 cases together. The document shows you the full pattern. What I can show you here is the surface. What is down there is everything underneath it. Pinned comment, weapons research, then come back. They knew about the negotiations. So when he died on January 7th, 1943, and agents arrived within 2 hours to seize his belongings, that response time wasn't coincidence. They were ready. But if the FBI was already watching Tesla, why didn't they intervene earlier? Why let an elderly inventor negotiate weapons technology with the Soviet Union from a hotel room in Midtown Manhattan for 3 years? Unless the monitoring itself was the point, unless someone wanted to know exactly who Tesla was talking to and what they were saying. The switchboard operators were the perfect surveillance mechanism. They didn't need to tap the line. They didn't need a warrant. They just needed to listen. Every call was manually connected. Every call passed through human hands and human ears before reaching its destination. One former Hotel New Yorker employee interviewed decades later described Tesla as a man who received unusual calls at unusual hours. Calls that came in after midnight. Calls where the operator was instructed to connect without announcing the caller's name. Calls where the party on the other end spoke in languages the operators didn't recognize. There is also the matter of Tesla's outgoing calls. In his final years, Tesla was increasingly isolated. He had few friends left alive. He fed pigeons in Bryant Park and talked to almost no one in person. But the phone calls continued. He was reaching out to someone, multiple someones. And whatever those conversations contained was important enough that the federal government considered it a national security matter the moment he stopped breathing. The Office of Alien Property was the agency that officially seized Tesla's belongings. Think about that name for a second. The Office of Alien Property. It was a wartime agency designed to confiscate assets belonging to citizens of enemy nations. Tesla was not an enemy citizen. He had been a naturalized American since 1891. He had lived in the United States for nearly 60 years. Using the Office of Alien Property to seize an American citizen's possessions was legally questionable at best. But it was fast. It bypassed normal channels. It avoided the courts, the press, and public scrutiny. The man who examined Tesla's papers for the government was John G. Trump, an MIT professor specializing in high-voltage physics and Van de Graaff generators. He was not a random academic pulled from a directory. Trump was already working on classified military projects involving high-voltage equipment and directed energy research. He was, in other words, one of the few people in the country who could actually understand what Tesla had been working on. The government didn't send a librarian to catalogue papers. They sent a weapons physicist. Trump spent 3 days reviewing Tesla's work and concluded that it contained nothing of significant value. Nothing dangerous, nothing worth classifying, just the ramblings of an aging inventor past his prime. 3 days to dismiss the life's work of the man who invented alternating current, radio transmission, and the rotating magnetic field. 3 days to look through trunks full of notebooks and declare it all worthless. And yet, the government kept the papers for years. Portions remained classified for decades. Some documents have still never been released. If there was truly nothing of value, why hold them? Why classify them? Why send a weapons physicist to evaluate the notebooks of a man who supposedly had nothing left to offer? The evaluation and the actions that followed it tell two completely different stories. The Switchboard angle answers this question in a way that the official narrative cannot, because the value wasn't just in Tesla's papers, it was in his contacts, his network, the people on the other end of those phone calls, the governments he was negotiating with, the military officials he was advising, the unnamed parties who called room 3327 after midnight and spoke in languages the operators couldn't identify. Tesla's papers might have been theoretical. His phone calls were operational. Someone in Washington understood this. Someone knew that the real intelligence wasn't in the equations and diagrams. It was in the relationships. Who was Tesla talking to? What had he promised them? What had he already shared? Those answers didn't live in a notebook. They lived in the Switchboard logs. And those logs have never been found. The Hotel New Yorker changed ownership multiple times after Tesla's death. It was converted into a residential building in the 1970s, then back into a hotel in the 1990s. Records were lost, archived, transferred, and misplaced across decades. But the Switchboard system itself was a massive physical operation. Logs, call sheets, operator notes. This was not a system that left no trace. It was a system that generated enormous paper trails by design. So where did those records go? Were they destroyed in the normal course of business? Were they seized along with Tesla's personal effects and simply never catalogued? Were they taken by someone who understood their value before anyone else did? Consider the timing. January 1943. The United States was deep into World War II. The Manhattan Project was underway in secret. Radar technology was being developed at MIT, in the same department where John G. Trump worked. The military was desperately seeking any technological advantage. And here was a dead inventor whose last phone calls may have included conversations with Soviet officials about directed energy weapons. The Soviet angle alone would have been enough to trigger a full intelligence response. But there were other parties too. The British had been in contact with Tesla about defensive weapons as early as 1937. The Yugoslav government had maintained communication with him throughout his time at the Hotel New Yorker. There were the unidentified callers from Washington who weren't FBI and weren't military intelligence, and there were the midnight calls in unrecognized languages that the operators logged but couldn't categorize. Each of these threads represented a potential intelligence goldmine. Not Tesla's theories about particle beams or wireless energy. The theories were in the notebooks. The real value was knowing who already had access to those theories, who Tesla had spoken to, what he had described, what he had promised, and which foreign governments might already possess information that the United States did not. Of course they wanted the Switchboard logs. Of course they wanted to know who was on the other end. The question is whether they got them and what they found. There is one more detail worth mentioning. Tesla's funeral was held on January 12, 1943, at the Cathedral of St. John the Divine. Over 2,000 people attended, which is remarkable for a man who was supposedly irrelevant and forgotten. The Yugoslav government sent an official delegation. The mayor of New York, Fiorello LaGuardia, read a eulogy over the radio. Messages of condolence arrived from multiple heads of state. Eleanor Roosevelt sent a personal note. For a washed-up inventor living on charity in a hotel room, Tesla seemed to matter enormously to an awful lot of powerful people. But the switchboard operators of the Hotel New Yorker were not interviewed. Not by the FBI, not by the press, not by anyone whose records have survived. The people who knew exactly who Tesla was talking to in his final days were never asked. Or they were asked, and those interviews have never been released. Either way, the silence is loud. We have Tesla's patents, we have his published papers, we have his seized notebooks, we have FBI memos and Office of Alien Property inventories, we have John G. Trump's dismissive evaluation. What we don't have is the simplest piece of evidence imaginable. A phone log, a record of calls, a list of names and numbers connected through a switchboard that processed every single communication in and out of the Hotel New Yorker for over a decade. That absence isn't an accident. It is an answer. The switchboard records would tell us what Tesla was doing, who he was doing it with, and why the federal government treated his death like a national security emergency. The fact that those records are missing is itself the most important record of all. Tesla died alone in a hotel room, but he was not isolated. He was connected. The switchboard operators knew it, the FBI knew it, and whoever was on the other end of those midnight calls knew it too. The question we should be asking isn't what was in Tesla's papers, it is who was on the other end of the line, and why, after 80 years, we still don't have the answer.